My name is Neil McKenna, and I'm a writer and a historian, and I write mostly about gay stuff. I'm going to give a talk about Fanny and Stella, which is the subject of my new book. And Fanny and Stella were Frederick Park and Ernest Boulton, and they were two very foolish young men who used to dress up in women's clothes. And on the evening of Thursday, the 28th of April, 1870, they were arrested as they left a theatre in drag. And they thought, and everyone else thought, that it was just a casual arrest, that they'd been rounded up because the police thought they were prostitutes, and the police used to herd prostitutes up. But in fact, when they appeared in court the next morning, they discovered that they'd been followed for a year. They'd been under surveillance, and the case became bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually, a year later, they found themselves on trial for more or less their lives in Westminster Hall, which is of course part of the Houses of Parliament. And it's the place where, you know, Charles I was put on trial, where famous traitors and treasoners are tried. And it was before the Lord Chief Justice and the Attorney General himself prosecuted the case, the first time he'd prosecuted a case of sodomy in 240 years. So it was an extraordinary event, and it captured the nation's imagination. It went round the world, and it was a huge, huge, huge spectacle. And basically, it was the first time that gay sexuality in the modern industrial age, where the state versus gay sexuality had come head to head. The reason why Fanny and Stella are so interesting is that there is a transcript, and that's remarkable because even the Oscar Wilde trial doesn't have a complete transcript. So obviously in 1871, when they went to Westminster Hall, somebody thought it worthwhile transcribing the case in shorthand and then transliterating it back into English, binding it all together and preserving it. And it's a remarkable survival. I mean, the very, very, very few trials we actually have complete transcripts for. And this transcript was in the Public Record Office, and it's with lots of depositions from the Bow Street hearing. There's a whole cache of letters from Fanny and Stella. The trial itself is really interesting, but actually what excited me was the kind of DNA of their lives that was embedded in the trial, because we have evidence from Stella's mother, we have evidence from Fanny's father. They weren't famous people, they weren't a great writer like Oscar Wilde. So their lives were, in a sense, commonplace and ordinary. And I was fascinated to be able to lift the lid on the lives of two Victorian young men who liked to cross-dress, who liked to go to bed with men, who sold their bottoms for money. And what really attracted me was the fact that they lived their lives absolutely for themselves. They had self-esteem that was through the roof. They weren't depressed, downtrodden, sad victims, although lots of bad stuff happened to them. They were brave and funny and valiant and courageous and promiscuous, and they loved men, and they camped around and they gloried in camp. History is usually told by the victors, the people who win, the majority, the powerful, the rich. And gay history has been told almost entirely by heterosexual people. I mean, there were one or two very honourable exceptions like Neil Bartlett, and we've had lots of cultural explorations, but most of the time gay history has been written by straight people, and it's been controlled and configured. The documents that we have been selected by heterosexuals. So our history, our true history as gay men, as lesbians, as transgendered people, has never really been told by us. And I think the good thing about Fanny and Stella was that we were able to find the voices, their lives, how they interacted. My whole career has been working as a gay journalist and as a gay writer. I mean, I've written about 10 articles connected with heterosexuality in my life. I've never written a book about heterosexuality. And I think it's very, very, very important because now, when I was born before the laws against gay sexuality were partially repealed. And now at this late stage in my life, I've reached a point where I have civil rights and I can be civilly partnered and possibly married and blah, 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 blah. So I have those rights. But I'm also concerned with the rights of the people who came before me, the people who were sent to prison in the 50s and the 60s, who were forcibly tortured by aversion therapy. And for those of you who don't know what aversion therapy is, this meant that you would go into prison, you would be put into a room, you would be shown slides of gay porn, and you would be electrocuted every time you saw a slide, often on the testicles or the penis, or you would be forced to drink an emetic. And an emetic is a substance that makes you vomit. So the idea was that you would see a homoerotic image and you would feel pain or you would vomit, and that it was designed to retrain you. It was torture by any other name. Now, the British Psychiatric Association has never apologised for their role in that. And I wonder why. Another issue, after the war, when the concentration camps were liberated, Pink Triangle prisoners were sent back by British forces to prisons. And the rationale behind that was that they were criminals who had never served their time in prison because a concentration camp was not deemed a prison. So men who had been sent to concentration camps and endured the most awful living hells, who were barely alive, were sent back by the British government to German prisons. The British government has never apologised. I think these are issues that, to me, they're real issues, and we won't have equality until, first of all, we reclaim our history, and secondly, we hold heterosexuals, we hold governments, organisations and institutions to account, and we make them acknowledge that they have done wrong. And they have never done that. And that's one of my passions. It's bringing people to account.